Okay, this is a new one from the Anfield rap, and we're calling it, I think we're working title, we're calling it Staying Sane. Obviously, we've all had a huge disruption to our normal lives, to our normal routines, and we are now all following government advice, staying indoors, going out once a day to exercise, all that kind of thing. You know the rules, you know what's happening, and you know how mad the world currently is. I've got with me Paul Cope and Bradley Busch, who you may well have seen from our Mind Games series. He is from InnerDrive. He is a sports psychologist. And if you haven't watched Mind Games yet, we'll go and give it a watch, because now's a good time, isn't it? You've probably got some time on your hands. But the idea behind this show is just a chat around staying sane. So, what can you be doing to not allow this situation to get on top of you? What can you be doing to keep your well-being well? That kind of thing, really. Paul's, by the way, started his own site, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Bradley's got his own business, InnerDrive. Check that out. There's loads of good stuff on their website, and as I say, check out Mind Games. But yeah, Brad, start with you, mate, and just on the current situation. You've obviously got clients. You're obviously thinking about these things, and this has been a huge disruption to everyone's routine, and that's a problem in itself, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, one thing I think everyone's kind of realizing throughout all this is we're creatures of habit, and all of a sudden we're kind of forced to create new habits, new routines, and I think especially last week when it was the first week, that transition of kind of what the new normal was going to look like. I think a lot of people found that boring, frustrating, but hopefully we're over that initial period. So hopefully people will find it a bit easier moving forward.
And so what would your initial advice be if someone's saying to you, Brad, I'm kicking around in the flat, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm totally out of kilter. What's your advice to? I mean, I guess you've literally got footballer clients who you're used to working with on a certain basis. All of a sudden, a very different basis now, in that they're in the same boat. It's a leveler, all this, in that, everyone's kicking around in the house and not sure what to do. So where would you be telling people to start in terms of keeping themselves well?
Well, you're right. I think it definitely is a leveler, because even though people have different personality and different abilities, there are some core functions that every human, all three of us, all your listeners, all footballers have, and that's kind of being disrupted. So one of them, for example, most people have a sense of purpose, doing something that creates value either financially or intrinsically. There's some sense of achievement there, whereas a lot of people now they don't have that because work has significantly changed. That's become a bit more of an issue. I think the blurring of home life and work life was already getting quite funky for most people anyway, but this has really caused that to the fore, which means it's really hard to kind of either get closure or move on from one thing to the next, because you're kind of always multitasking, always doing something yet never doing anything, and it's that blur. So I think trying to find some sort of purpose, trying to find a new routine, a bit of structure, I think would be good. In terms of staying sane, we know, basic even NHS guidelines, loneliness and isolation are big triggers for boredom, depression, anxiety, frustration, and yet we're kind of enforced in this isolation now. So even though it's probably not the same as real interaction with humans in person, some form of connection, of catching up with people, Skyping, house party, FaceTime, whatever it is probably really important, because it's really easy now to go large periods of time without even speaking out loud. And so therefore that isolation kind of broods, I guess.
Paul, you've started a new site, as I mentioned there, and one of the first posts you've done on the site is about fear, and I think this is maybe something we can be discussing with Brad as well. And it's the idea that, it's very easy right now to consume too much news, basically, to watch rolling news on Sky, on BBC One, whatever it may be, to continually log into the internet and see if there's something new. When the reality of the situation is, A, you can choose your news sources and choose what you listen to, and B, you can choose how much you consume. And realistically, 80 80%, if not more, of the news now all relates to the coronavirus. And so therefore, how much updating do you need? Me personally, and I'm no expert on it, I just know how I'm managing my life. I'm sticking to half an hour of news a day, and that's it, because I don't think I need any more. I can feel it's not good for me if I watch more, but also I get everything I need from that half an hour. In terms of an update on the coronavirus, that I can consume it in half an hour, I honestly can. And then after that, I go away from it again. I go and read a book. I go and listen to an album I like. I go and exercise, whatever it may be. And the piece you wrote was touching on some similar themes.
Yeah, and I think one of the if you can take a step back in times like this and sort of try and take a deep breath and be a bit calm about it, it's actually a really good opportunity for everyone to assess not just how they react during a global pandemic, but generally in life. I remember even talking about Brexit, that it was consuming people's lives on a 24/7 basis. But if you look back over that period now of 2 or 3 years, you could have probably just, forget watching half an hour of news a day, you could have probably watched the news once every 6 months, and you'd have got everything you needed. And everything in between was just people arguing about it and going over and over the same points. And it's similar with this, is that actually nothing much changes. You get updates on how many people have died. Well, you can, and it's horrendous and it's not great and nobody wants that to happen, but it's inevitable. There are going to be more deaths in the next couple of weeks. It's one of the things I'm concerned about for people, is there's this lag. So you can get this strange psychological effect where people think that what is going on now in society with the lockdown is directly related to how many people die today, which is not true in something like this. There's like a 2-week lag behind it. So that can actually make you feel worse as well. So actually you can, once you've consumed good sort of, I like talking in the article about good quality news, listen to the scientists, you know what, everyone knows what you're meant to be doing now. Isolated, stay away from other people, wash your hands. Once you've got that, all you can do then is control your own environment. And once you control your own environment, to a large extent, what's going on the news doesn't affect your life. And all it will do is lead to more fear and more anxiety if you consume lots of it. So it's a massive one, I think, is reducing news intake.
Well, I guess the interesting thing about the news is because it's we live in a 24/7 news cycle. People always have to produce new content, but yet there's not much news to say. So you're going to get more extreme opinions or more wild theories. And now that we have time in self-isolation to consume that ever-present news, you can see how it would feed that cycle, because it becomes more and more warped, the more extremes the stories come to fill those slots.
The other thing, Brad, is social media. And obviously we talked about this with you before and about how you've dealt with footballers and around how they use it, how much they consume. This is another time around social media where, again, that may be something that people should consider, how much they use it, how they use it, how it's making them feel and things like that. I think even on the positive stuff, there's a little bit of a danger there. And what I mean by that is there's lots of people giving lots of advice right now, and some of it's good, some of it's okay, and some of it's bad, like the situation always is with everything in life. And I think you can get yourself, this is what I've been doing with myself and my mad brain. I've started to say to myself, I should be doing something with this time. Everyone's doing something with the time. Everyone's learning the guitar. Everyone's doing workouts. Whereas it's actually fine to say to yourself, if I just sat and watched films all day and I feel all right for sitting and watching films all day, that's all right.
So much. I was having this conversation earlier with my wife around, like, lowering expectations is actually quite important in times like this. Like we start with our little kid, like with all these expectations of these learning activities that we're going to do, and then actually, like, sometimes the win is getting through the day, and it's okay to be struggling, and it's okay to just go, I binged watched, or I didn't do anything productive, because this is the new normal and people are still finding their feet, and the expectation of keeping up with everyone else, especially when you don't come into contact with these people, is so much more now, because everyone gives a false impression on social media. I think that's really true and really important.
Well, what do you think on I hear lots of people talk about, and in books I've read and things I've listened to, people always talk about lists. make lists and then refer back to the list. Make a list at the start of the day, even small things that you may need to do or should be doing, and then refer back to it at the end of the day. Now, again, obviously, none of this is like set in stone advice. You must follow it. It's just a discussion. It's just something we're talking about. But I have actually found the list thing useful because I put things down that I know I need to do. Like I say, that are only small things like, maybe hoover up or wash the dishes or whatever. And then if later in the day I have that creeping feeling of I haven't done anything with me time, refer back to the list and I can go, actually, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that. And then all of a sudden you're like, yes.
Yeah. So basically what you've described is like, so the two main benefits of lists, I guess, is helps a bit of motivation. Because basically people want to be consistent with themselves. So if you said, I'm going to do this, that kind of creates a bit of desire of consistency to then do it. It helps for a bit of motivation and achievement, like what you described, like you feel like you've had a sense of purpose. The only tweak I would say, a good little tip if you're doing lists, is have some of your list about achievements, do the dishes, hoover up, but also definitely have some sort of pleasure stuff on the list as well, because it's not just the aim of the day is not just to complete chores, and especially in times like this we have to find wins when you can. So if it's watch an old football match, gaming, what you described earlier with films, like that's good stuff to have on the list. Like it's time for your enjoyment. So yeah, achievement and pleasure I think are good combinations when it comes to lists.
And with the clients you work with generally across the board, because you obviously get to see this across a wide spectrum, do you find that it massively depends on personality type? So even when you talk about those two things, pleasure and chores, for example, there'll be like a spectrum of some people will maintain better mental health if they're getting through more chores, and some people will be better if they're watching more Netflix.
Yeah, well, the way I kind of describe it is I think in these sort of extreme or unique times, we should probably say, everyone becomes a bit of a caricature of their core personality. So essentially, I think if you were a bit lazy beforehand, this just gives you permission to be even lazier. And if you were really health conscious beforehand, you're probably taking that to an extreme now as well. The same thing probably happens with work ethic for our jobs, for housekeeping, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it massively depends on personality, and that's what makes psychology, what makes panic and fear so interesting, because there are no set rules. There's always this variation based on people's personality types.
What do you think about the sort of the issue around control as well? Because that's another recurring theme in psychology, isn't it? You should only be really thinking about what you can control. I'm sure that's what, and some advice leaked out that went to Liverpool footballers from the psychologist that they use. And one of the key lines he was using was that, all the stuff that you're reading about, that you're watching on the news, that is out of your control. You could not control either the coronavirus or the government's response to the coronavirus. You can only control how you feel, what you do, and that kind of thing. Around that, for someone that may be, I think us in this conversation, it's obviously your job. Me and Paul are very interested in this subject, hence why we're doing this and why we're doing mind games. But there will be a lot of people that are sort of watching it, listening to it and going, well, what is it you're talking about here? So can you explain that concept?
Okay, so there's two things that I think are interlinked. So that one, like there's a human need to have control over a situation. When we don't have control and we fight against that, it tends to lead to like the stress and frustration and anxiety. This is true for playing football as it is for day-to-day life. The other thing that we have a need for, which is I think linked and relevant now, is a need for certainty. Uncertainty is basically one of the biggest drivers of stress and fear. If we knew worst case scenario, even if it was terrible, in a way people are better prepared for that because you can brace for impact and you kind of know what to expect. But when it's uncertain, that's when people's mind tends to run away with them. And there's so much uncertainty at the moment. Like we don't know how long this period will last for. We don't know the severity. So that's on the big health stuff. We don't even know certainty on if the season's going to come back, if footballers are going to play again. So there's an air of uncertainty around, and I think that uncertainty of not knowing and lack of control, that you can't do anything to influence that, makes it quite stressful. So yeah, the advice the Liverpool players got would be sensible advice, but that's just good advice in life as opposed to for this specific situation. And the whole uncertainty. So the way some people try to combat that is what you said earlier, is they go to the other extreme. They try and consume too much knowledge and information to try and combat that uncertainty. But then you kind of feed into this paranoia of the news cycle. So the key is like, it's like all this stuff. It's like a kind of like a Goldilocks effect of like just the right amount of knowledge is power, but then making your peace with what you can't change and finding control and certainty where you can. And that's where routines, that's where schedules, that's where to-do lists, that's where organizing to speak to friends, starting new work projects. You can find pockets of certainty and control amidst this environment. And that, I think, is the challenge for most people, footballers and non-footballers alike at the moment.
There was another thing in it as well, which I've mentioned on other shows, but I was intrigued by it. I get why it's there. Again, I think it'd be interesting for you to talk on it. The psychologist had also talked about maintaining good oral health. So essentially making sure that every day you're getting up and brushing your teeth. And he, in his opinion, that was very influential on how you felt and how you got on with the rest of your day, really. Do you think that's a good one as well? You know, just something in the morning that triggers, you know, good thoughts, gets you going. I've heard people say things like, you know, you should make your bed.
Yeah, or, I've heard bed one, yeah.
Other people are saying as well around you may want to sort of dress as though you were going to work, even though you're not actually going to work. Other people, to be fair, say that if you're not wearing a tracksuit currently, you're a policeman. So, you know, there's varying advice on it. But you know what I mean? Is that something you would say to people you work with as well? Look to have sort of pillars in your day that you almost lean on to get yourself going.
Yeah, like you want to have a few anchor points, I think, essentially. Another one, I think those are all really important. Another one I think is quite important is food. Like it's very easy to eat at irregular times because like people tend to eat more when they're bored as opposed to when they're hungry. And then that makes you feel fatigued and heavy. The time you spend preparing food, it's really easy to get into really bad habits around that, and it just makes you feel worse. And again, it kind of comes back to this routine or everything not getting blurred. Like having some structure is important because then it provides some normality again. Whereas if you kind of mush everything together, like if you think about it, like it just becomes bland, and the days become very long that way because there's no kind of defined times. So some sort of bedtime routine, similar times to wake up, I think food, and like the really obvious one is everyone should be doing exercise at the moment. It is incredibly easy to be really sedentary at the moment, and we know, not specific to fighting corona itself, but just like exercise is the best medication for like life. It makes you feel better, it makes you you know, your body functions better, your brain functions better. It can't be underestimated. And then again, you can link that into what we were talking earlier about having targets or purpose, trying to get better if you're going for runs with times. Like there are ways that you can use it in this period, I think.
Paul, that was something you mentioned in your post as well, wasn't it? You know, there's loads of stuff online. You know, anyone who's ever used the internet can find themselves a workout within seconds that they can use. There's so many out there. There's different ones. There's ones where you don't need any equipment. You can use your body weight. There's ones for if you're just starting out and you've never done one, you can do 5-minute ones, 10-minute ones, 20-minute ones. There's so much there that, you know, if you do decide, as Brad says, to get stuck into something in the house, as well as sort of going out your once a day as well as recommended, you know, there's so much there, isn't there, mate?
Yeah, and I think this ties into a couple of other things as well, which is my mindset overall is really, really important, just generally speaking, and excuses, something I've chatted to a lot of people, because in what I've done sort of in the coaching and the book I wrote about changing careers, one of the excuses I get a lot back from people is they don't have enough time to do these things, don't have enough time to exercise, don't have enough time to look into getting a new job or whatever, or even do meditation or whatever it might be that people suggest to them that could improve their health or their mental health. And what a lot of people are finding out, they've got a bit more time, even if it's just you don't have to commute to work anymore. you've probably got an extra couple of hours in the day. Even if you do, if you've got to look after the kids and that's busy during the day, well, you've saved that commuting time. So I would say it's really important to sort of, when you're talking about lists and things, almost write down what you're doing in your day. When Brad's talking about routines, well, think about where you've saved that time and how you can use it in a and it's that balance again, because you don't want to get sucked into this. Everybody on Facebook's learning how to play the guitar and baking bread. Where I look at the moment, seems to be people baking bread. I don't know where that's come from, but there is time you can find to, and this is the interesting thing. You only need 15 minutes, so you can go on the internet and find a workout that you can do in your living room in your underpants. So I've come across a lot of people who will be saying, well, I can't go outside, or I've got no equipment, and well, you don't need any of that stuff. Actually, you can do it in your house on the internet. Joe Wicks will become the sort of the love him or hate him guy out of the end of this, won't he? Get millions of people looking at him doing HIIT routines. But I saw him on the news the other day. They asked him to show an exercise anybody could do, and it made me laugh because he was basically just walking on the spot. He was like, if you can only do a limited amount of exercise, walk on the spot. If you want to do it a bit more vigorously, run on the spot. And that's it. Just do that for 20 minutes and you're good.
I'll tell you what, Gareth doing those sort of exercises in his underpants in his living room would make for a great feature episode.
Yeah, give it 2 weeks.
I mean, this is quite amusing, and I haven't even told either of you this, but I literally did exercise in my underpants earlier. It just wasn't on the internet. But as you say, give it 2 weeks, and the Anfield Wrap, who knows where we'll be going with our content. I mean, is there anything else you would point people to in general, Brad? Any stuff that any online resource or anything like that for people who do want to sort of, they don't like where the days are going currently. And I don't mean in terms of getting a new skill. I just mean in terms of managing the days and something they can read, something that can put them on track.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think now, as you kind of mentioned, now is a great time to be reading. You'll never have less distractions at the moment. There is a wealth. I mean, when you actually think about it, kind of how we all use the internet, myself included, is we have the world's knowledge at our fingertips, and most people spend it watching pandas sneeze on YouTube. And as you say, Joe Wicks is a good example, but there is someone for every subject doing stuff out there, whatever it is. So we do a lot of stuff in education, for example, and there's Carol Vorderman's math, there's Starkey's history stuff. There is lots of stuff, and I think the key for me is it's not about getting better than someone else. That's really the key for all of this stuff. And that's why the social media stuff can become a bit toxic, is whatever it is you're reading online, if it's for self-development and learning, that's one of the best ways to stay sane and to get some enjoyment from this period. Because what's interesting is this period will end. It's really important to know, this won't be forever. And when normal world, whatever that looks like, returns, it'd just be nice to be better placed as an individual within that, even regardless compared to anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it is a time for thinking, isn't it, Kopi? But you've got to sort of think about how you're thinking. And I think that's sort of some of the themes that you're going to be going through on your new thing. Yeah,
something I often come back, and that's why we love chatting to people like Brad, but something I often come back to with all this stuff is awareness. Most of in the things I've learned over the past few years, most of the time we're not even aware of this stuff, because when we talk about the routine and the creatures of habit, most of us are just caught up in that most of the time, and we don't stop and think about anxiety or fear, which is running through all of our lives all of the time. And this gives us an opportunity to do that, sort of take a step back, have a look, think about all of these different things, the exercise I'm doing, the stuff I'm consuming generally, not just news. I've noticed in my own life a massive change. I used to watch hours upon hours. I'd have a stressful day and then come in, as lots of us do, and watch hours and hours of sort of murderous box sets about, serious crime and everything very dark. And I realised over time that affects you psychologically as well. If instead of doing that, you come in and watch comedy every night, it changes your mood. It changes how you see things.
Well, this is the thing at this present time is, as you said, it's not often you get to really consciously choose your routine, your habits. And yet, because this is so new, everyone has that opportunity now. And there is some nice research out there on mindset that basically say how people approach an event has huge implications for how they kind of feel and behave during it. And some people, their first response is like, what do I stand to lose? What am I missing out on? What is done that I can't do previously? Like, let's think of all the things that I like doing that I can't do now. And that kind of breeds frustration. Whereas this other mindset that's available is to kind of go, like, yes, you have to be a realist and acknowledge the situation. So it's not just saying everything's brilliant and it's great that I'm in this place, but what can I do to make it better? What can I gain? And I actually think it's, in a weird way, it's going to be interesting because people get to consciously choose new habits and routines now. And some people will come out of it better because of it.
I think that's interesting as well, that, Brad, just quickly before we wrap up, in that, you know, I had a situation where I was thinking, I was doing exactly what you've just said. So I was thinking, I only really see my mates around the football. You know, that's the main coming together for me and my mates. We have a drink before, we have a drink for afterwards. We go and talk about it, etc. We do the podcast, we do the video, and that's being stripped away. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, and now we officially can't go and see our mates anyway. And so I was like, well, this is shit. But then I thought, well, why don't we do what I'd seen other people saying about, you know, doing things over Zoom, and you mentioned house party before. We're obviously doing this over Skype. Yeah. And so one of my friends organised last Friday a drink over Zoom.
Yeah, I had my birthday drinks over Zoom last.
Did you?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And do you know what? It's obviously different. You're obviously in a different environment. You've sort of got to take it in turns a little bit to speak. But equally, we got everyone on one call who we haven't managed to get together for a drink for probably 10 years, because we've got one of our good mates lives in Spain, another one of our good mates lives in Norwich. Obviously, we've got some in Liverpool, but to get all them together in one room, if you like, and have a discussion, have a drink, have a laugh, talk about past times, future times, whatever, was actually a unique experience, to the point where at the end of it, there was 2 or 3 of us saying, why don't we do this more often? Even when this is all over, why don't we do it anyway? Because it was really easy to organise. We all enjoyed ourselves, and we all went away from it with a smile on our faces.
Right, nice. Right, I thought of one more thing that I meant to say earlier that I thought captures that perfectly, which I thought you guys would be happy with. That kind of sums this up. There's this concept in psychology I thought you'd like called it's called the Stockdale paradox, right? And what this basically says is, so Stockdale was a sergeant in the army in the Vietnam War, and after he got taken prisoner of war, and afterwards, on reflecting on like who did well when they were kept in captivity or prisoner of war, he basically said, so the pessimists, they really struggled because like every day felt really long and they always went to worst case scenario. He said, interesting enough, the real optimists of like, we're gonna be out of here soon, did well in the short term, but when their arbitrary deadlines sort of like, we'll be out by Christmas, didn't happen, they then have this huge crash. And so the Stockdale paradox basically says is, you have to be a realist and accept your situation, or accept the gravity of your situation, but then be an optimistic within that about what can you do differently or better to make the most from it. So yeah, you organising your big friends reunion over Zoom is a good example of like, these are the confounds that we have to like play within, but what can we do to make it less shit?
Yeah.
And then that's basically it.
Brilliant. I love it.
So yeah, you're to survive the Vietnam War is basically what I'm telling you.
Brilliant, boys. Well, listen, both give yourselves a little plug. Brad, you're innerdrive.co.uk, is that right?
Yeah, and we're also on Twitter at InnerDrive and InnerDrive Sport, mainly tweeting about sports psychology in general.
Brilliant. So give Brad a follow. You will have seen him before, as I say, on Mind Games, but if you have newly subscribed, go back and look that up. And we were talking in depth about footballers, Liverpool, remember all that. And Paul, yeah, give your new site a shout, mate.
Yeah, dead easy, mate. It's all linked to the social. So it's Paul #7 Cope. So Paul 7 Cope on all the socials and paul7cope.com for the website.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your time, boys, and hopefully for everyone listening and watching, that has been useful, helpful. Do let us know, as I always say on these things, but particularly so at the moment, we do really want your feedback on the stuff we're putting out there. We're trying lots of new things. Obviously, we're trying to keep getting stuff out there for you, stuff that's useful and stuff that's, you know, representing these mad times that we are in. Hopefully this was one of those things. So let us know. Thanks again, boys. That has been Staying Sane.